Eros Empire by Jordan Owen. Copyright 2011, all rights reserved. The following story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or to actual events, past or present, is purely coincidental. The views expressed in this novel are the author's and do not necessarily reflect the views of Bear Manor Fiction or any of its employees. For Lex and Sky, twin furies to the upsetting of my throne. Chapter 1. The jungle sprawl gave way to a sandy clearing, its dense network of impassable wildlife arranged by some primitive force into a circle outlined by flat stones. It was into this rounded expanse that three intrepid explorers stepped, each one wearing a beige archaeologist uniform, each with the top knotted just under their ample breasts to expose their midriffs, and each brandishing a machete. Leading the trek through the web of Flora was Flora, her peroxide blonde hair tied up in a bun. "I think this is it, you guys," she said, enunciating each word as though it were the beginning of its own sentence. The other two explorers followed, one a brunette, the other redhead. "Is this the place where the ancient rectal ritual took place?" asked the brunette. "There's only one way to find out," said the redhead. "We have to perform the summoning ritual of the double tongues." "Do you really think we'll summon Slam Dingo?" "We can only hope," said Flora. "Our research grant from the university depends on it." This time she said each syllable of the word university as though it were the start of a sentence. "Minnie, you read the sacred text and Felicity and I will act it out." Minnie, the frizzy redhead, took her backpack off and rummaged around in it, eventually removing a large leather-bound book, which she opened to a marked page. "Begin the ritual by removing your clothes and getting on your knees." Both Flora and the brunette, Felicity Hatchback, began untying their tops, rubbing each other's nipples as they became exposed, then stripped off their tiny shorts, exposing their shorn crotches. "Now assume the most sacred 69 position." They complied and began licking each other's genitals with ravenous abandon. Similar directions followed, the girls eagerly taking on each new act with the same decadent charisma. After some 20 minutes of sapphic performance, there was a rustling in the nearby trees. All three women ceased their participation in the ritual and watched with exaggerated suspense as a humanoid figure stepped through the bushes. Standing almost 7 feet tall, the figure's Nubian skin glistened in the tropical sun, his bulging muscles all seeming to carry one's eyes on a rippling journey down to the massive penis that hung in a proud arc over his softball-sized scrotum. The figure wore a rectangular wooden mask that was outlined with parrot feathers and painted in wildly intersecting streaks. "Who dares interrupt the slumber of the almighty Slam Dingo?" boomed the voice behind the mask. "We do," said Flora, looking up from the shorn pussy before her. "It's for our research grant at the university." "Are you fair-skinned maidens prepared to complete the rectal ritual?" boomed the voice. "Yes," said Felicity Hatchback. "Then choose you a sacrifice." "I shall be the sacrifice," cried Minnie, throwing the book down in the sand and ripping at her clothes. Naked except for her Doc Martens, Minnie placed her hands on Felicity's back, using her interlocked companions for support, as Slam Dingo stepped behind her, his intimidating tools stiff and ready for action. With cool precision, he guided his prick to Minnie's little pink tail hole, pressing the head slowly into the orifice that opened begrudgingly. As his tool entered his victim completely, Slam Dingo began to thrust in and out, both he and his partner grunting passionately as their pace intensified. Soon they built up a rhythm, the act seeming to build towards an inevitable climax until the feral god noticed a light brown liquid was beginning to course from Minnie's anus. Withdrawing his prick, the ancient god Slam Dingo realized that it was covered in thick chunks of feces. "What the fuck?" shouted Luther Slam Dingo Stevens, pulling off the costume mask. "God damn it, cut!" barked an unseen voice. The voice belonged to Dominic Daniels, who sat just out of the camera shot in a black director's chair. "What the hell is this?" he spat between two tripod-mounted cameras in the large warehouse where the island set had been constructed for Jungle Bunnies 2, The Shaft of Slam Dingo. The warehouse had been cleared out and converted into a soundstage a couple of years ago by Dominic's employer, Alston Image. "Slam, I'm sorry," said Dominic, motioning for one of the crew members to come over with a hose and wash the actor down. "Damn right you sorry," said Slam, a hint of his street background creeping into his irritated voice. "You better get me a stunt cunt for the penetration shots." "We'll get you cleaned up and do this right next take," replied Dominic, patting Slam on the back as he headed away from the set and across the open, echoing stone and steel chamber to a side room where Minnie Asterix had locked herself into a bathroom stall. "What the hell is wrong with you?" growled Dominic as he entered the restroom. "Fuck off," said Minnie, sobbing from inside the stall. "You're supposed to be the anal queen. You don't know how to prepare for an anal scene? I said fuck off!" Dominic cursed under his breath and stormed out of the restroom, his steps echoing around the soundstage as he extracted a cellular phone from his pocket and dialed the front desk at Alston Image. "Alston Image," replied a perky voice on the other end. "It's Dominic. Put me through to Isaac." "Yes, sir, Mr. Daniels." There was a single ring, and then a man's voice answered. "Dominic, talk to me." The voice belonged to Isaac Alston, the CEO and founder of Alston Image. The voice carried the same smooth, elevating sensation as being in an airplane during liftoff. "Isaac, I'm on the set of Jungle Bunnies 2 and Minnie has had an ass malfunction. Now Slam will only do the rest of the scenes with her if we use a stunt cunt for the penetration shots." "Go ahead with it. I'll have casting send somebody out." Even with Minnie's new ass toy launching next month, I thought this was supposed to be the official tie-in product for the first run. "Just shoot the footage and I'll see if I want to use it. And Dominic." "Yes?" "Tell the cast and crew to go ahead and break for lunch, then come back to the office. I have something I want to bounce off of you." "You got it, Isaac. Over and out." Dominic flicked the cover down on the cell phone and returned it to his pocket. "All right, cast and crew," he boomed, bringing the megaphone to his mouth. "Alston says you get an early lunch break. Report back in 1 hour." Dominic heard the rustle of crew members setting down various pieces of equipment and became aware of the echoes of feet as they plodded towards cars, lunchboxes, and the catering table. The sun hit his eyes in a blunt force wave, and he pulled on a pair of sunglasses as he unlocked the driver's side door of his Audi TT. Climbing in, he set the megaphone on the passenger's seat next to a stack of manila folders. It pleased Dominic to find that the streets were relatively empty, lunch hour still being 30 minutes away for most. Strategically arranged clusters of palm trees zipped past Dominic's car as he navigated the pleasant roads of the San Fernando Valley. In that moment, Dominic allowed himself to fall into the thought process that he had perfected over the years to help make his life wonderful. He reflected that this was a beautiful late summer morning in a vibrant city, and that as he drove his favorite car from the set to his office, his greatest worry in life was covering for this minor glitch in the film he was making about beautiful naked women. Life was good. But even so, the word something, spoken by Isaac Alston, lingered in his mind. It hung in his thoughts like a child that insolently stuck out its tongue and refused to leave. With this word, Isaac had seized control of the pleasant frame of mind that Dominic fought so hard to attain. The word hovered in his mind as he reached the Alston Image main office, a 10-story tower of black glass that shot upwards like an extraterrestrial spire from the lush ground below. The building bore a single indication of its interior nature, the company name printed on the upper right hand of the building in large white cubic letters. Bold and plain in their brazenness, the letters stood as a solemn challenge to the reader. There were a raised chin in the face of those that would decry Isaac Alston as a smut peddler or his company as a maggot-festooned corpse in the graveyard of capitalism. Where one expected to see a lurid outline of a naked woman or a cartoon pair of breasts made to jiggle by alternating neon tubes, they saw only those letters bound in the bulwark of professionalism. Above the letters, in the penthouse office, was Isaac Alston. If one brought binoculars, stood about 5 feet into the alley across the street, and looked at the perfect angle, it would be possible to see Alston high above, always working diligently, as though there were a flow of lifeblood being generated by his quiet, constant labor that ran through the veins of the building, giving the entire structure the imposing dignity it demanded. There were often protesters on the sidewalk outside the pitch-black marble wall that surrounded the property. They usually came in specific groups with specific causes and specific fashions. Today, there were hippies next to the wall brandishing signs that declared Alston hates women and down with female exploitation. As Dominic handed his badge out the window to the security guard in the booth by the front gates, he heard one of the protesters shout, "Eat this, male oppressor." Dominic hit the automatic window controls in the driver's side door, and the glass panels slid up just in time to block a rotten egg that splattered across the window in a comical gush. Dominic opened the car door, stepped out, and took the nightstick offered by the security guard. His once pleasant mood hitting rock bottom, Dominic stormed across the concrete sidewalk to the small mob and cracked the egg thrower across the jaw, the satisfying snap of bone reverberating up the nightstick and into Dominic's arm, settling in his chest as a modestly elevated heartbeat. The punk kid lay on the ground sobbing as he struggled to move his jaw, which hung limp and shattered from the skull to which it had once been attached. The blue and purple patch on his face was framed by blood and teeth on the sidewalk. Dominic took out his phone and called 911. Yeah, hey, it's Dominic Daniels. Yeah, I beat up another protester. Better get an ambulance out here. He pocketed the phone and turned back to his car. Hey, man, you can't do that, said a hippie girl with braided dreadlocks as she stepped into Dominic's path. Be glad I don't hit women, replied Dominic with disinterest. Not many male oppressors can say that. He stepped around the stammering girl and returned the guard's nightstick. The gate opened as Dominic climbed back into his car and drove through the parking lot, his good mood returning. There was an implied violence in the young man's green eyes, not the sort of brimming mania found in the perpetually intoxicated vision of a bloodthirsty sociopath, but the steady assurance that the capacity for that level of brutality existed but was mediated by the stern focus of a cold, regimented mind. Framing those sharp, disarming emerald eyes was a wild mane of crimson hair punctuated by blonde streaks. Anyone who looked at that face, its harsh juxtaposition of uniformity and anarchy underscored by a strong jawline and high cheekbones, would want to speak to the man behind it, to learn about the personality that brought these opposites together. His form was toned and muscular, his naturally pale skin tinged a healthy light brown by the California sun. His arms, reaching symmetrically out of his black tank top, gave an amphitheater countenance to his bulging chest. His black and white camouflage pants terminated at a pair of polished jackboots, their shine catching the sunlight that poured in from the glassed-in canopy. "Mr. Steele," said a woman's voice from the Onyx reception counter. The young man, Hank Steele, turned from the neon-colored abstract painting that adorned the eastern wall of the Alston Image lobby to face the receptionist. The room was laden with white marble tiles that caught the light from the arched half-dome of glass that covered the entrance and bounced it all around the room, making up for the natural light that was muted by purple walls and matching sitting areas on either side of the room. The vaulted ceiling and walls, which created the impression of a Frank Lloyd Wright-inspired cathedral, culminated in the stucco stone wall behind the receptionist's desk, which featured a large crest with the Alston Image logo. To either side of the front desk were elevators whose stark, placid, reflective metals stood in sharp utilitarian contrast to the flamboyant artistry of the surrounding architecture. "Yes," Hank replied, his disarming eyes mellowing slightly when he raised his eyebrows gently. "Mr. Alston will see you now. Take the executive elevator to the top floor." Hank turned and walked towards the elevator, which had a card slot in lieu of a call button. "You'll need this," said the receptionist, leaning around the corner of her desk and extending a digital keycard. "Thanks," said Hank, glancing down at the card, which read, "Guest pass useful for 6 hours after activation." Hank returned to the elevator, but just as he placed the card in the slot, the doors parted to reveal a creature of supreme sacred beauty. He saw her eyes first and then saw into her eyes. They were deep azure pools that seemed to brim with a haunting amusement, as if they probed every visage for a source of jocular passion and demanded that every moment of life be filled with this intangible merriment. After a prolonged instant, Hank became aware that the mouth beneath the eyes was gently contorting into a confused smile, and that his own was hanging open stupidly. This angelic woman, her long brown hair falling to her breasts, was familiar in some way, and Hank's stunned brain groped for a realization that would manifest his wonderment. You're Billy Solar," he said finally, the words coming after a hard swallow. "I certainly am," she chuckled, her smile still confused but somewhat more inviting. "So are you a new model, or did you just get past security?" Both, I guess. Hank Steele." Hank extended his hand and Billy took it, her graceful poise guiding her hand to his in the lilting, downward-facing posture of an antebellum lady or medieval maiden. "I'm sorry, Billy, I don't normally get starstruck. I'm a fan of your work. It got me through some hard times." "I'm sure it did," she replied, a wise-ass coquettishness replacing her face's previous reservation as she stepped past him. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to jet." As she left, Hank stepped backwards into the elevator, watching Billy walk away. Her midriff t-shirt drew attention down her lower back to her jeans, where her apple-shaped butt danced invitingly as she walked towards the front door. As Billy walked out, another figure entered, a tall, slim man with curly graying hair who wore a beige photographer's vest. He bumped fists in passing with Billy, and Hank heard him say, "Movie night tonight?" to which she replied, "You know it." "Good morning, Mr. Daniels," said the receptionist. "Hey, Carol," said the man in passing. "Hold that door," he barked to Hank, who put out an arm to catch the closing elevator door. Mr. Daniels slid past Hank, who was still watching Billy walk out into the morning sun that welcomed and enveloped her like warm molasses being poured over cherries. "You want to finish puberty some other time, kid? I've got work to do." Hank snapped out of his trance at the older man's words and pushed the top button. He glanced at the other passenger and nodded questioningly at the button panel. That floor's fine. I'm going to meet with the boss. Me too, replied Hank, extending his hand. I'm Hank. Dominic, the other replied, shaking the offered hand as the door slid shut. Are you Dominic Daniels? That's me. I saw your movie One Blew Into the Hoo-Hoo's Nest. That got an AVN award, right? Yeah, best gangbang. It was good. Thanks, I agree. You're more honest than humble, I take it, observed Hank as the express elevator shot to the top floor. Most successful people are, replied Dominic. There was silence at that point, and Hank retreated into himself, thinking about meeting Billy Solar, the way she had seemed to look so deeply into his heart and soul for that instant. It was uncharacteristic of him to be rendered so vulnerable by a woman, but as he thought on it further, he realized the experience was not entirely unpleasant. Much to the contrary, he found himself wanting to be in her line of fire again as soon as possible. The elevator opened, revealing that the entire top floor of the building was Isaac's office. Plates of black oak lined the walls, each sporting a framed poster of a different Alston Image landmark film, everything from a poster for the company's first film, a bisexual threesome reel called Hi Honey, I'm Boned, to their more significant successes in feature-length productions. The wall opposite the elevator was a mural of windows, in front of which was Isaac Alston's desk, its glass surface adorned with a wafer-thin computer screen, and Hank noticed that it was transparent and that he could see the reverse of the on-screen image through the back of it. The keyboard was a hologram that hovered just above the table. In contrast to the sleek efficiency of the computer, the rest of Alston's desk was covered in stacks of papers, each sectioned off into colored folders, but within those folders were reams of paper that shot out at wild angles with color-coded tabs at various intervals. Hank was impressed that the flamboyance of the papers flourished under the rigidity of Isaac's organization. Alston sat behind the desk, wrapped in his work. Hank took him in with quiet reverie. Alston's black Durango harness boots rose into his neatly pressed blue jeans and white button-down shirt. The shirt had a wild floral design coming up the back over one shoulder, orchids blossoming along the left breast. Hank felt as though he were in the presence of a religious ritual that required the utmost calm as he watched Alston work. Hey, Isaac, said Dominic after a moment. It looks like I got here a little early. Alston looked up as if seeing them both for the first time. His face was hard and sharp, cutting tight angles that suggested maturity without the sagging wrinkles inherent to age. At 43, a spiky shuck of gray hair was the only indication of his years. It would seem that you did, replied Alston. He glanced to Hank. Are you the new prospect? Yes, sir. Dominic, could you hang out for a moment while I do this young man's interview? Sure thing, Isaac. Dominic crossed the room and sat down among an arrangement of leather sofas, returning to the contents of the file folder he carried. Alston took a folder from the top of the stack and looked inside. Hank Steele, he asked. That's me. Have a seat, please. Hank said as Alston removed the contents of the folder, which contained Hank's headshot, his resume, and medical records. You have an impressive, if somewhat short resume, Mr. Steele. Thank you, sir. You don't list any product licenses. No, sir, my previous employer said I wasn't ready. No wonder, it says here you worked for Intersect Productions. Yes, sir. Artie wouldn't know a good product if it bit him on the ass. Your endowment is 11 inches? Yes, sir. Prove it. Alston handed a ruler to Hank, who unzipped his pants, removing his tool. Even flaccid, it was obviously the full 11 inches, but Hank held the ruler against it, showing the tip to stop just short of the end of the wooden strip. Outstanding, said Alston, taking back his ruler. Hank zipped his pants and sat back down. There should be at least 3 dildos based on that dick on the market right now. I'll hire you for that alone. Do you do boys and girls? Absolutely. Did you have another name for gay shoots? Yes. Scrap it. If I'm going to put out toys based on your anatomy, they'll be easier to sell with just one name associated with them. How much was Artie paying you for gay shoots? Artie doesn't do gay shoots. Actually, that's why he fired me. I was contracted to him for straight scenes only, so I started doing gay scenes on the side since Artie hasn't put me in a movie in God knows how long. When he heard about it, he freaked and kicked me out. How much did he pay you for straight scenes? He paid me $500 a scene, but he only filmed a handful of them, and fewer ever saw the light of day. I see. How much were you making for gay shoots? $800. I'll pay you $800 for straight scenes, $1,000 for gay scenes, and $1,200 for transsexual scenes. We'll roll out the straight scenes first, along with a heavy solo content for your website. We can broach the gay market quickly that way. How does that sound? It sounds great, sir. Outstanding. How many cum shots can you do in a day? I averaged 3, but my best was 7. Sounds good, but I'll put you with the company trainer. She'll give you an exercise routine to help improve that. Cool. I want to get you started on something as soon as possible. Hey, Dominic, do you have any spots for this guy coming up? Dominic looked up from his papers. I still need somebody for that BDSM shoot I'm doing with Billy Solar next week. The name made Hank's heart jump a pinch. I thought you had a guy for that, or I wouldn't have green-lighted it. Kid broke his arm skateboarding. I had casting looking for a replacement. You free to start this coming Wednesday? Asked Alston, returning to Hank. Absolutely. Ever do a BDSM scene before? No, I haven't. Can you tie knots? Absolutely. I grew up in Scouts. Learned how to give head there, too. So, tell me more about yourself. Why did you decide to get into the porn industry? Well, I enlisted in the military when I turned 18. It's a legacy thing for the men in my family, and was stationed in Afghanistan when a roadside bomb hit my ATV. I was in traction and honorably discharged after recovering, and when I got back home to Nevada, I started teaching martial arts and doing MMA tournaments, but the whole time I kept hearing politicians, mainly conservatives, talking about the troops and how they were fighting for our freedom. But it was always in the context of admonishing someone with a dissenting opinion. Some fat cat politician sees someone in his district opening a porn shop or protesting pollution or the government, etc. He says, just think of the troops that are out there fighting for your right to do that. It was the weirdest thing, like it was supposed to make the person receiving the statement feel real guilty about what they were doing. It's like the soldiers were fighting for our freedom, but God forbid you should actually use it. So I started thinking about that, about what it means to really love the American way of life, and decided that I was going to find a way to take full advantage of everything that I had fought for, that these scumbags were being such dildos about. And when I got my knee fucked up in a Muay Thai tournament and had to stop fighting professionally, I decided that the only bone I hadn't broken was my dick, so I started looking into porn, since that was something those politicians were always reminding us we'd fought for. Got hooked up with Artie, and you know the rest. Sounds good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for yours. Go see Becky in HR. She'll run your paperwork and get the contract printed up. Feel free to take it to any attorney you might have in mind, but have it back to us no later than Monday so we can process it before the BDSM shoot, or find someone else if you decide to back out. Okay. I'm thinking what we'll do is a few photo shoots and some solo videos to start building a website around, and then we'll shoot some gay and straight cock worship scenes to sell it. After that gets rolling, we'll announce the release of your dildos, but I want to go ahead and get them molded as soon as possible. Sure thing. Isaac Alston stood up and extended his hand. Hank stood and took the outstretched palm, giving him a firm handshake and a twinkling smile. Rest up, said Isaac, returning the starry-eyed look with one of warm confidence. You come to work for me next week. Barely able to see over the heads of the scantily clad women and flamboyantly dressed men that surrounded her in the Los Angeles Convention Center, the rotund, miniature shape of Andrea Danvers navigated the aisles of booths that made up the Adult Business and Media Convention. The vast utilitarian chamber had been remade into a smorgasbord of erotic diversity, with the slick, polished veneer of modern business colliding smoothly with the carnival ambience of the lovingly garish lights and decorations of the various corporate booths. Danvers took notice of the projection screens and high-def televisions in various booths that showcased the company product and played engaging music. Sickening displays of horrific body-punishing cruelty are projected onto all four walls of the convention center to remind women that they exist as plastic, disposable objects for the pleasure of men, wrote Danvers in the notebook that she held at the ready as though it were a holy scroll in which the names of the damned were logged. As she moved through the facility, Danvers was struck at just how available the various models were. Stopping at one booth, she observed a platinum blonde with a large fake bust posing for a picture with what was presumably a fan. The blonde wore a single-piece silver dress made of some sort of vinyl material that seemed ready to burst. As the camera clicked, she placed one leg against the crotch of the bemused college-age boy that had requested the picture, put one arm around his shoulder and the opposite hand against his chest, giving the appearance of desiring him sexually. The camera flashed and the boy thanked the model, then took his camera back from the fellow convention patron that had taken the shot. The next man that approached the booth asked for an autograph on a DVD case and a lipstick impression next to the signature. She consented coquettishly and gave the cover a smooch, leaving a glittery residue below which she swirled off the rapid application of her autograph. A third man approached and asked to take a picture of the model's posterior, which she was apparently famous for. She smiled and turned away, pulling up her minimal dress to reveal the legendary buttocks, which hung between a transparent thong. Models are routinely forced to perform degrading acts of misogynistic humiliation for the enjoyment of pornified men who cast them aside as disposable fuck objects, she scrawled furiously. There was a froth building between her teeth as she elbowed her way over to a cluster of 3 businessmen who appeared to be discussing industry matters. "Excuse me, are any of you available for an interview?" she squeaked, standing on her toes and trying to catch their attention. None of them noticed her, and the sound of the convention's thumping, bass-heavy dance music drowned out her shrill voice. "Thing is," said one of the men, "there's only so much that you can do with Gonzo as a medium before it starts to get dull and repetitive. I mean, you interview the girl, pan slowly up and down her body, and then you fuck her. And we all know the sequence. Blow job, bend over the couch, cowgirl, reverse cowgirl, anal, then jerk off and come on her face. You have to start contextualizing the event pretty soon, and you've got a feature on your hands." "I agree," said another of the 3. "I think the fetish providers have it easy in that sense. For them, it's more about the context than it is about the sex." Interviews with industry heads revealed that they are out of ideas and looking to sexual torture as the next big thrill for their sex-saturated male audience. Danvers moved on through the crowd, finding herself at the more expansive and elaborate booths that showcased the larger companies and their more high-budget feature-length productions. All of the major players were there, but one stood out above the rest, seeming to preside over the entire chamber with the regal countenance of a grand emperor, Alston Image. In contrast to the surrounding booths, the Alston Image venue occupied most of the wall against which it stood proudly, with 3 large projection screens showcasing clips from recent films with a shimmering outline of the Alston Image logo superimposed on them. A long line of buxom young starlets from the Alston Image contract stable and their muscular male counterparts sat signing autographs and conversing with the endless lines of fans that filed past, their polite smiles and open demeanor not wavering in the least. As her eyes probed up and down the long row of performers looking for one that was not surrounded by convention-goers, she saw that none were available, and a security guard stopped her when she tried to push her way through the crowd. Irritated, Danvers looked around for a more vulnerable quarry and saw a booth nearby for Darcy's mainframe. DMF had been started a decade ago by a former Alston Image contract girl, Darcy Collins. After leaving the company on good terms, she'd entered semi-retirement from performance and applied what she'd learned about the business to launching her own company. Although it was marginal in the face of the success of Alston Image, as most other companies were, it was highly profitable, turning in an annual profit of $8 million based largely on lesbian and solo female content. The titular founder of Darcy's mainframe sat at a table in front of her booth, which was festooned with posters from her recent releases, all of them featuring the kind of floral artistry commonly associated with female folk rock singers and upscale 90s alternative hippie ambience. "Female culture is frequently exploited for the piggish enjoyment of patriarchal tyrants," scrawled Danvers as she approached the booth. There was a noticeable but not distasteful scent of watery lilac perfume in the air around Darcy Collins as she signed copies of DVDs and various posters for the steady line of fans. Danvers took a moment to observe Darcy's clothing. She wore what at first glance appeared to be the top half of a pantsuit, but terminated in a wisp of fabric that barely passed as a miniskirt, letting the woman's long, slender legs drift lusciously down to the cute feet that seemed to beg for the tender grace of an expert masseuse. The top half of the pantsuit was unbuttoned and revealed Darcy's ample and legendary natural breasts to the world. Unavoidable to the eyes, the richly maternal glands filled their black leather bra to the fullest, and Danvers sensed that the top had been purposely chosen as a size too small. Danvers looked at Darcy's voluminous golden locks and thought of the dull sprigs of hair that formed her scalp and burned a little inside. She clenched her jaw at the sight of Darcy's slender neckline and sculpted, chiseled jawline, and fumed at her own bulbous set of chins. The fluidic blue of Darcy's animate eyes made Danvers clench her teeth in disgust. And the breasts. No breasts should be that big. Why can't she have a mastectomy out of respect for the less endowed? Didn't she realize that her beauty was an affront to real women? "Why are you dressed like that?" asked Danvers sharply. "Like what?" replied Darcy, her attention still focused on the line of patrons. "Like a female chauvinist pig," replied Danvers. Female chauvinist pig, Darcy chuckled distantly. That's a new one. I thought you were going to tell me that I look like a brazen hussy. No, that term is sexist and outdated. We've liberated your sexuality for you. And what does that mean? Darcy was still focused more on the fans than the annoying hag to her right. It means that you're free to express your sexuality the way you want, not the way men want. Then I choose to wear this outfit. No, if you wear that outfit, you're reinforcing the patriarchy. We don't live in a patriarchy. If we did, it would mean that women had no rights whatsoever. There may be inequality in this country, but that doesn't mean we live in an oppressive dictatorship. It just means we have room to grow as a nation. It's not about the society we live in. It's about the society men think we live in. If you wear that outfit, you're telling men that your body is open for all comers and you're encouraging them to rape you. You have to keep your body covered and out of sight at all times so that men won't be tempted to rape you. That sounds like the kind of thing they would say in heavily Islamic countries, said Darcy, now turning to face the pestering woman. When you characterize the nature of rape as being something the rapist can't control, then you take the blame off of the perpetrator and put it onto the victim. I get that you think you're being progressive here, but really all you're doing is repackaging the same old arguments that people have used against female sexuality for thousands of years, that women are temptresses that will get raped by men if they aren't careful and therefore must keep as much of their bodies covered as possible. Well, you've obviously been brainwashed by the patriarchy. Fuck off. There's no need to get testy, said a husky, eternally condescending voice. Danvers turned to see a tall, rail-thin blonde that wore a black cocktail dress. Her towering face swept inward to form a half-moon from which her nose shot out like a twisted beak. Her complete lack of femininity was underscored by her incredulous attempt to appear womanlike, and for a moment Darcy thought the creature was a transsexual but couldn't imagine a company that would hire such a poor specimen. After a moment it dawned on Darcy who this was. You're Alice Growsome, aren't you? You mean the right-wing pundit from the news shows? Hissed Danvers. I should have known you'd be here. Why do you say that? Asked Growsome, her condescending tone only slightly modified for the sake of pleasantry. Well, you're a conservative. Don't you love capitalist industries like porn? Actually, no. I'm here to review the convention for my column. We conservatives are completely opposed to porn, the real ones anyway. Well, it is ruining our children. I couldn't agree more, and it's turning our men into pigs. Oh, absolutely, and it's a civil rights violation. Totally. You want to go for coffee? Certainly. Well, we're going to take off, said Danvers over her shoulder, suddenly chipper. Yeah, whatever, said Darcy, having already returned her focus to the autograph seekers. Oh, said Danvers. Would you be willing to come to a lecture I'm giving in a few weeks? I'll make sure my school pays your appearance fee. Have my people call your people, said Darcy, wishing the two clowns would depart. Darcy apologized to the fans that had been eyeing the pair with morbid amusement after Danvers and Growsome disappeared into the tightly packed crowd. Darcy spent another 2 hours at her booth and went back to her hotel suite where she enjoyed a pleasant dip in the jacuzzi before meeting some friends for dinner. She gave no further thought to Andrea Danvers and Alice Growsome, who spent the afternoon agreeing on many things. End of Chapter 1.